Okay. Sean Abrahams is an actress, director, and writer born in Aylesbury, England. She originally studied musical theatre at Bucks New University, but later went on to train in professional acting at Drama Studio London. Sean is known for her portrayal of Blake in British indie horror Sacrilege, which went on to win Best Horror at FIFF. She made her feature-length directorial debut in 2023 on Love Kills, streamed on Prime Video. Her second collaboration with actor and director Pao Meso, Complete Strangers, reached the #1 ranking on Amazon's LGBT chart. She also enjoyed a featured role in Listen, directed by Ana Roca, which went on to win the Lion of the Future Award for Best Debut Feature at Venice Film Festival. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on today. It's really nice to meet you and speak with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm dying to ask you, and I hope I pronounce it okay. First of all, how was Cannes Film Festival? How was that? I'm
Yeah,
dying to know.
fun. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a real experience, and being my first time, it was a lot to get used to. But I think the main takeaway for me is why didn't I do this sooner? So
Amazing.
yeah, it was a really, really nice experience. So I'm still just trying to kind of digest a lot of it, but yeah, I would recommend it.
Oh, are you planning to go back?
I would like to, but I feel that I had a wonderful coach who, before I went to the festival, and her main sort of one of her takeaways was that it's really useful to, you maybe don't need to go every year, that actually if you work really hard when you're there, that the contacts that you make, you then can build on over a couple of years, and then maybe try another festival like Berlinale, or maybe even Venice, and make different contacts and then come back round to Cannes, or yeah, or you could go every year, I suppose,
Sure.
if it suits you.
Yeah, that sounds pretty strategic and smart, actually. I've had some conversations with your agents, and they're really lovely to deal with, actually. I'm familiar with you, Sean, from a movie that my family and I really enjoyed watching, and that was, of course, I mentioned you played Blake in Sacrilege, and I loved your character. You're so amazingly versatile, and you're so heavily tattooed, and the fact that you're not heavily tattooed, and there was so much going on with your character that I love. That I wanted to ask, like, what was that sort of first of all, was that your first biggest film role, and what led you into wanting to do film?
Yeah, it probably was. I can remember actually getting the call to say I got the part, and I remember I actually threw up
I can
because I
imagine.
think like just yeah, I'd been waiting so long, I think, for a proper feature, and for it was quite a jump up to go to, essentially, that they were sharing lead, they were like joint leads, really, I guess, the different women in Sacrilege. And it felt like a step for me, so I can remember being quite intimidated but excited in at the same time. And yeah, so it was my first featured, major role, really. And I think film, it was always my intention, I think, as a child. Like, I remember, funnily enough, I was discussing this with somebody at Cannes, because they were like, when was the moment for you that there was like no turning back, and it just sort of, and I remembered I very vividly had this, when you were a child, and I was in playgroup or whatever, and they were like, oh, I think I may have been a bit older than that, but they were like, what would you like to be when you grow up? And we had to paint what it was that we were going to be when we grew up. And I remember painting a nurse to start with, and then I took a step back, and something in that moment was like, and then I added some stage lights, and then from that point on, it was like, I'm an actress, and that was it. And I kind of, obviously, when I was younger, did more sort of, got involved in panto, got involved in, kind of local drama society projects. And but my love was always film. Like I loved watching films with my mum and my family, and I think that was kind of the end goal. So when I got to kind of university age, um, I did a couple of drama school auditions, but I think I was maybe a little bit lost at the time, and I came from a town where not many people had been to drama school. So I think I was lacking a bit of guidance in that respect. And I ended up going to university instead and to study acting. And even though it was a wonderful, wonderful university, I just don't think it was quite the right fit for me at that either at that time, or it just wasn't the right fit. And so I ended up coming back home and then we had a local careers advisor who said, "You're academic, you need to get back into education. I've got you this audition doing musical theatre." And I was like, well, I've sung and I've acted, but I've never really put the two together. So it was always supposed to be a stopgap, going into musical theatre. And then it stuck, and I ended up getting a degree. And interestingly, I learned a lot more about writing musical theatre than I think I'd ever anticipated in that process. And I think that was a really valuable experience. But again, I still didn't quite feel like I fitted in the musical theatre scene. So I took some time out after, and then ended up deciding that I felt that I needed to go to drama school, and film was where I wanted to transition back to, come full circle to. So I then went to Drama Studio London and had a wonderful film and TV tutor there who really inspired me. And then from that point on, it was just I got involved with a local filmmaker, and then it just seemed to have been, luckily for me, where my career has kind of landed. So yeah, happy to be in that space now. Although I might come back to musical theatre one day, maybe write something.
That's amazing. Can you kind of go in between the roles? I know that we mentioned in the bio that you're taking up directing now. Does that make it easy, an easier transition?
What, being versatile in.
Yes, yes. I'm so curious about that transition. That's just very exciting. I don't know anything about it.
No, I feel I've been talking a lot about it since, obviously being at Cannes, and I feel that directing keeps finding me, which is obviously wonderful. It's not necessarily something that I set out to. I didn't say one day, oh, well, I'm going to try directing now. I was lucky enough to have people approach me. Um, did I want to? And I think you get sometimes different types of directing. So, like more technical directors, or, that work more like a DOP, or I myself, obviously, coming from it as an actor's director, very much from an acting perspective. So, I think that being my strength, then as a director, you're essentially then managing a team. So it's then about having the best team around you that you can possible, to fulfill. So I know that I need a really strong DOP to translate, from actor into, into the camera essentially. So that was an interesting experience. But I think definitely even musical theatre as a discipline, very very versatile. You're moving between different mediums and blending them all together. So potentially, yeah, I feel that I have benefited from a lot of the different experiences that I've had, and it made it a lot easier, transitioning from musical theatre to film, which seems like a conflict, like a contradiction in terms of styles, to then, maybe then the transition to directing didn't seem so big a jump.
Sure, sure. That's incredible. And I'm just kind of curious, is that I seem to be hearing more often now that women actresses are making sort of a leap to go behind the camera. I know that seems to be somewhat common with models. Sometimes they will go into photography. Do you find that common, or is it really not so much from your perspective?
I think what was really interesting for me was, I think maybe since the pandemic, um, a lot of stuff now is fairly you're kind of acting into a vacuum, producing a lot of self tapes. You're kind of working quite, solitary. And I think one of the wonderful things about going to Cannes was all of a sudden I was lucky enough to be part of an amazing female group called Yes She Can, play on the can, um, and that's headed by a wonderful woman called Faith Elizabeth, and that connected me with so many different women at different stages of their career, at different points in front of, behind the camera, mixes of both, that I think I didn't necessarily understand just how much it, existed. I think Cannes is obviously such a big international festival, so it's kind of taking a step from the London bubble to all of a sudden this international stage where there's so much going on, and so many different perspectives, and you're bound to find somebody somewhere who kind of aligns with your vision. So I think, yes, even I was surprised how many women were, at all different ages and stages of their career, were sort of part of that group, and yeah, taking steps behind the camera. And there were so many different events and activities actually set up at Cannes, to support women behind the camera, that I think even some of the men were like, oh, like, where are the male events that I can go to? Because all of a sudden it was like, these kind of female only, events. But yeah, it was really, really empowering, really inspiring.
Wonderful. That's amazing. That's just amazing. I feel so blessed to be able to talk to you after an event like Cannes, because like when you were telling me about it, I have to think about these questions while I'm on the plane to Cannes. I was like, yes, please. I was just, it's just such a great, living vicariously through that event. It sounds just amazing. Um, I want to ask you specifically about your role as Blake, because
Mhm.
that just an amazing character to see you do that. And it showed me, and then I went on your website and I was able to see you in different characters, and it just showed me your versatility. And when I was watching it, I thought, oh, I wonder if that actress is actually has those heavy tattoos, and maybe they scouted her to look like that. And then I realized that was not the case. I'm just curious, like, first of all, did that take a really long time for you to get ready every day and put on all of those tattoos? I can't even imagine.
It was a little bit, yeah, labor intensive. I mean, it was fun. I definitely enjoyed it because it was such a transformation, and obviously I had the hair extensions as well. The director wanted more tattoos than I had,
Wow.
but just practically, because there were sort of pool scenes as well, and because they were using transfers, obviously having tattoos on my hands or on my chest, it would, because of kind of creasing of the skin over time, it probably, if you were doing an extended shoot, wasn't particularly practical. So that's why in the end we kind of stuck to the sleeve. But it was
Interesting.
funny when we were having down days. I can remember somebody commenting and saying, "Oh my God, I love your tattoos." Like we went out to like get Sunday lunch or something, and I was like, "Thanks," like they're not real. But yeah, and we had some challenges as well because they were transfers, and I think I can't remember if we potentially were shooting an extra day or something happened, and we ended up with not enough tattoos for this particular shoot that we had, and we were kind of having to piece together what we did have to try and just cover it for kind of continuity's sake. So yeah, it was interesting.
I can only imagine that be quite challenging. I'm kind of curious, is for a role like that, would it have been, is it beneficial to have tattoos for certain roles, or can that kind of limit you because they may have to cover your tattoos for other roles? I'm kind of curious about that.
I mean, generally speaking, my training like has always been it's better to not have tattoos
Okay,
because obviously then you're more versatile.
I see.
Um, it's probably easier to add tattoos than, although there have been advances in makeup and stuff now, so
Sure,
covering tattoos, but depending on maybe what stage of your career you're at, obviously it's easier to sell that a makeup artist is going to have to cover all your tattoos.
sure.
Maybe, you know, potentially, you know, obviously Angelina Jolie could probably, you know, they're going to cover all her tattoos so she can do any role, but
Yes, yeah,
it's the difference between you and another actor and you're starting out potentially. But having said that,
sure,
you know, I've got a friend of mine and she's quite heavily tattooed, but it's so part of her casting type
sure, sure,
that the roles that she's going for that is probably going to be warranted anyway, that
sure.
she kind of looks a certain way. um but yeah, interesting fact actually, I used to have a very distinctive mole on my chin that used to get mistaken for a piercing all of the time, and the director
Interesting.
actually thought it was a piercing when he originally saw my headshot. So he thought I had like kind of, you know, piercings, not tattoos, but yeah, sort of maybe had a kind of vibe about me. But yeah,
Interesting. Interesting. Did that work in your favor at the time? Was that a good thing?
apparently,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
apparently, you know, he thought it was a piercing, and they all thought it was a piercing until I turned up, and then they realized. But yeah, I mean, that was something that I chose to change because it's in, you know, I appreciate you saying obviously about the versatility because I don't
Yeah.
necessarily, you know, I wanted to remain neutral and be able to play different roles. And I, you know, I loved playing Blake. She was a lot of fun to play. But generally speaking, I think the people that know me would not necessarily say that that was, you know, that I was particularly close to Blake as a, you know, in terms of personality. But you know, so that's interesting. Yeah.
That is so funny because as I'm talking to you, you are so different from that character, but you played that character so well that it's just like people have to who haven't seen that, they need to check it out and certainly see that you're very versatile, and that really stood out to me that you can play a wide variety of roles, and that must really come in handy. You did a great job with Blake.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I guess, I kind of would like to go into about a bit of if you have some tips or advice for people who might be looking to get into the acting field, or is that something that sort of finds you generally? How do you have any advice for people that might want to be looking down that path, or may want their kids to be, if that is something that their
Mm.
children want?
I think I've thought about this, and I really wish that there was like this roadmap that you could kind of lay out. But I think there are so many different ways of finding it. There's a great book actually called Talent Is Not Enough, that I really enjoy, by a lady called Charlotte Thornton. And I don't mean that in a, you know, a discouraging way, because I think if you are talented, I think eventually, you know, it will find you. But I think one of the main things I would say is don't neglect your. It's There's a lot of rejection
Mm.
with acting, so I think that actually mindset is really really important, and I feel like maybe that is maybe one of the biggest takeaways, because I don't necessarily believe, I'm not somebody who believes you need to go to drama school to to be a good actor. I think what's really valuable about drama school is that it gives you a space to concentrate on your craft, concentrate on you, and explore different ways of working. And I think there are certain tools that drama school will impart to you, because there will be times invariably when you have to turn up on a set and maybe you don't feel your best that day, or you don't necessarily gel with the person you're acting with, or the director even sometimes. And I've been not had that experience, luckily. But I think then that's when drama school training comes into its own. Is that you're kind of, you've got the skills to cope because it's a job, and obviously understanding how a professional set works, and all of that sort of thing as well. I think that's useful, but I think you can make your own work. I think that is becoming more and more a legitimate way into, if you don't see the roles for yourself that you want, if you can either write them yourself or, find, I think managing, bringing the skills that other people have together, so saying, making connections and alliances with people with the skills that you feel you need, and vice versa, then you can create your own parts. And my colleague Pal Masso has done incredibly well with that. He everything he's done has been very micro budget, and I don't say that in a kind of disparaging way. It's that what he achieves with a micro budget is incredible, and he's able to wear a lot of different hats. um so yeah, I hope that is useful. I wish I had
Amazing.
something more coherent, and but yeah,
No,
if
it's perfect.
anybody needs any more, then please reach out, and I will be more than happy to give what small, experience I feel that I have.
No, that was amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm curious about, what your what your steps are going forward. What is coming up for you, Sean, and where do you see yourself going into directing more? What projects do you have coming up?
I mean, that was one of the things about Cannes, that I went to kind of see what my position in the industry is, to understand from a high level perspective how the industry works. And because when you start working in indie film, very often you'll be wearing so many different hats. So you'll be like directing and producing, and I feel that it's important, if you're going to take a next step, to maybe understand what wearing one hat really well means. And I think Cam was a great place to get an overview of, okay, well, how, if I were to write film, how do I, how do I then connect with producers? How do I find finance? How do I? So I feel that I am predominantly an actor. Acting is my love, and that for me is where I'm kind of focusing my efforts for now. And I think I definitely have been had my eyes open to this world of directing. And for me, one of the things that I took away from being part of these kind of female empowerment groups, I love period dramas, I love costume dramas. And for me, I feel like that is where I would love to, that's what I would love to be in next. So I've been trying to make, obviously, connections for projects, and for me, I'm now thinking perhaps I would like to work on my own projects, so I could have ownership of my own project and take it through the whole process, so that it feels like my voice, and I can also perhaps even create this part that hasn't been made yet, for myself. So I just think there are so many instances of women being edited or removed from history, and it feels like such an exciting time to now revisit and tell these stories of women who have been perhaps neglected from history, and yeah, bring them into a new sphere for modern women to enjoy and be inspired by.
It's amazing. I love seeing that. I love seeing the vast array of ages that the roles that are out there, and even in modeling it's taken a
Mm.
huge turn. And Sean, before we wrap up here, I appreciate you mentioning the rejection aspect of all of it, because that hit me huge. I'd say that's, I don't know if you would agree, that's one of the hardest things to overcome, but everybody deals with it, and it it makes you stronger too. I don't know if you've experienced that it's made you also stronger and more confident.
Yeah, I think one of the main things, and this is something that I would say too, is to always, because one of the wonderful liberating things actually about being an actor is that you can never really be in competition with anybody else. And I think that's what we have to remind ourselves, because you are you and you are the only version of you. So you can never be in direct competition with anybody else, because nobody is going to play that role like you, or vice versa for other people. And so often it's quite a saturated industry in terms of an unemployment rate at any one time, but so often it has nothing to do with your what you did in the audition room. Very often it will be the height was wrong, or again, sometimes even against other cast members. They're casting a cast, not just one individual. So one of the things that somebody left with me, and I do try and stand by, is that when you go into an audition, I try to think about it. It's important to do your work for the part, but not to obsess over the part, because it may not be this part. It may be 5 parts down the line that suddenly you're right for something. So concentrate on the meeting and the contact with the casting director, instead of obsessing over the one role that then you may invariably not get, because it might be the fifth role that makes you. um and the same, I think, when you come out, I think, rather than putting it on the onus on the other person, that did they like me, because after the audition you'll be circling through like how it went. Did they like me? Oh, they didn't like that. They, and all of those sorts of things. But I think if you can take it away from them and say, did I do my best work? And if you can say I did my best work, then you've done all that you could do. And if there are things that you felt you need to improve, then that's what you take away and you bring for the next thing. So those would be my insights on the rejection. And that, over time, it's difficult because you're being your own product, but over time, those are the things, the distinction between, you know and becoming comfortable with yourself. So yeah, those are my insights into how to deal with rejection.
Thank you. Thank you. That's extremely important and extremely powerful. Sean, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's just been lovely to talk to you. And I was just wondering if you're on social medias or anything where people might be able to follow your work and what you're up to lately and what you have coming up, or anything that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so if you would like to see anything, if you're on Amazon Prime, you can catch Complete Strangers on Amazon Prime, and you can also catch Love Kills, which is the film that I had my directorial debut, and I'm also playing a serial killer's love interest in it. So wearing a couple of different
Exciting.
hats in that one.
Brilliant.
Um, yeah, so that's if obviously if you'd like to see my work, if you'd like to follow me on socials, it's just at Sian Abrahams, and you should be able to find me that way. Yeah, so it'd be nice to connect with people.
Absolutely. And as soon as people see you in Sacrilege, they're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's gonna be blown away, because it's such a difference. But it was lovely to speak with you today. Thank you for your
Thank you.
thank you, and for your insight and for your education, for just, taking the time to share with me today. And, I really appreciate it. I know you're busy, and, thank you so much for being with me today. It was a treat.
My pleasure.